Mr. President, Commissioners, it's now 11:30. You have a full quorum.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the Ada County Highway District, ladies and gentlemen. As we begin, we'll ask the commission, who has in great detail examined the agenda, if they have any questions about this week's agenda. None? Okay. Then, right off the bat, we'll turn the time over to Director Wong for his director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Stacy, if you could bring up the presentation, please. Before we start, just a couple updates. I've shared a couple things with you earlier this morning. Tomorrow, this building will be closed and such. We've covered all the options to be able to ensure we continue services, but everybody will be working from home. Our maintenance operation will deploy out of Adams in the morning and then continue to operate as needed through Cloverdale, coming back to Adams tomorrow. We're working through our traffic control operations right now. The TMC, again, will be up and running either in person or via remote operations and such. And again, and this is due to continued water issues and the construction that's going on outside. So we're keeping a pretty good track of that, but the water will be gone all day tomorrow. So we'll be in deployed locations, we'll call it. Yes, sir.
What is the anticipated duration of the closure? Just tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Tomorrow. I've been told that the water will be on and off intermittently on Friday. We can work through that. So it should be back here. But it'll be gone tomorrow. Hey, well, Commissioners, what I wanted to share with you this morning was somewhat of a summary and a look forward into recommendations that you'll receive regarding ACHD for the next 8 years and such. All these recommendations, of course, are just that, recommendations. And as we work through your budget and work through your integrated 5E work plan, we will incorporate those into those formal documents for your review, your critique, your recommendations, and or your approval or not. But what I wanted to do again is give you the what I'll call the read ahead on what you'll be seeing as we move forward. Next slide, please, Stacy. Mexico, huh? Anyway, Commissioners, as you are well aware, as you've seen from the previous briefings, we are really at a three-tiered challenge as we move forward here in Ada County. I refer you to Senator Dan Hertog's and Representative Palmer's quote that they were talking about when they were working the transportation bill, which again, if nothing incredibly weird goes on other than the normal weird stuff at the legislature, you will have a transportation bill in the near future. And it basically goes to the population that continues to come here from all over the place. Labor. I shared this with you about a week ago when we were talking about our temp operations. I think it's very interesting to note what our Personal Plus, our temp services group, continues to share with all of their customers across the board. And we see this across all of Idaho. Bottom line, it is a very competitive market. It will continue to be a competitive market for the next X number of years, and rightly so, justly so, for those folks that are, again, facing different challenges or different career decisions at this point in time. There are other financial opportunities that allow them to take a little longer to make those career decisions as they move forward, and it's well laid out there. Transformation. Commissioners, you have challenged us across the board, and justifiably so, to change and look at all the different things that we are working through as a group. And as such, of course, as we briefed you, full steam forward, but the same token, that requires a little bit more energy when it comes down to equipment, people, places, spaces, that sort of thing, than the normal operations here at ACHD. So borrowing a term that I've used in the past, when it's all said and done, your staff really is about stall speed when it comes down to everything that we're doing right now and and those other challenges that are in front of us. Next slide, Stacy. So, right up front, this is my assessment as to where we are as an organization. And I want to thank the Commission. The Commission has never failed to support the team here at the Ada County Highway District. Funding, those are green. Of course, there's a question mark going forward. I'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation as to where we think this may be. Equipment, thank you. We have the best. We have everything we need. But as we continue to now build those 2 new facilities that you now own, that will become a challenge going into the future. Spaces and places were great. We'll have an update to you later on today on some items when it comes to spaces and places. And what I call the business infrastructure, the IT plan. Several years ago, we presented a 5-year strategy to the commission, and they very graciously supported it. We have gone from, and I'm not exaggerating this, from basically tin cups and wires, where nobody in this organization could talk to anybody else on a consistent basis, to where we are today, where we have a very aggressive IT team to include cyber and security. Such as you know, we have been pulsed by Russia, China, the Ukraine, you name it, across the board. And so far, we have been very successful in not being held hostage. Staffing, there's the weak link as we go for today. I share with you that we're at a yellow, which I call caution. And as we go into 22, if nothing changes, we'll be in orange going to red, unable to execute the requirements and missions that you've given us here, both internally and externally. Now, let me share some insights for you. Next slide, please. You've received several, but I wanted to give you more specifics on right now and where our development and technical services team is. As you can see, it has been a growth operation across Ada County. And this is just Ada County. I'm not talking Idaho or anyplace else. On what we're seeing in those different areas. During my monthly update on metrics, I've shared some of the indicators to all of you as to demands on the team. But as we look now from 2020 to March, you can see that we've already continued to exceed those prior goals, if you're going to call it, for what is being put in front of your team. Plans and projects, you received our presentation last week. And when you, again, referring to the percentage of increase that we have for recording requirements for our planning team and our project team, it is amazing that we continue to be able to answer the bell across the board. Maintenance. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call robbing Peter to pay Paul when it comes down to our operations and how we move things around today just to sort of stay even. And the last time I think I was in front of you, I think I reported about 5,100 miles of roadway. There it is as of yesterday, and it will continue to grow. And of course, we are in the process starting next year, well actually this year, with some of the basics and such as standing up your 2 new facilities, the Ustick Maintenance Yard and the Franklin Traffic Operations operation. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that's in front of all of us as we walk through the Ada County operate the Ada County Highway District. Next slide, please. Of course, but not least, let's take a little look at the buildings that are going on. I think as you speak with your fellow elected officials, these are the facts. This is rather eye-opening when you put everything down from a year, from 13 to 20, and then what we're looking at in the projection. This is absolutely amazing as to the building and the growth that's going on into the district, which will affect each one of your decisions to us as what we do moving forward in the future. So there it is. It's an amazing challenge. Next slide, please. So what are our staff recommendations to you as we walk into the budget and integrated 5-year work plan? I approach this in somewhat of a different perspective. What I like to bring to the commission, what we brought to commission to pass, are these 4 different categories. Such. First one is what I call priority, and that's across the board. I look at compliance, go to jail. These critical issues that we must fill by federal mandate, state mandate, ADA, EPA, stormwater, drainage, those sort of things. And we put that as our priority. across the board. And as you've seen in the past, when we've brought recommendations to the commission, they really have been in that that compliance area to make sure we are doing everything we are required to do by statute, by law. Of note, we are expecting in June to have that final report of our ADA transition team from our consultants, MIG, from California. A little peek under on the table, so to speak. I do expect to see some very interesting recommendations regarding additional expenditures and compliances that we should be looking at as an organization to meet new criteria, which we will do, and such across the board. I then look at mission critical. In other words, if we don't have this, if we can't support this request, then the mission either fails, it's not a go to jail, or we have a huge degradation. You'll see one of those today on one of the recommendations that we're going to make. And then mission enhancement. I think Commissioner McKinney talked about this last week about, okay, what can we do? If we need this to do better, then that's something we should look for going forward. And that's how we look at that category. The red line is that, and I'm just going to be candid, I really don't look at anything underneath that red line. I call it mission enrichment. It's the nice to have. If there was a tremendous abundance of spaces and places and dollars and cents, we have some nice to have things, but we were able to execute your direction to us very efficiently and effectively with those major three bullets as opposed to that. So what I want to share with you next is the recommendations that we'll be bringing to you very shortly, then in the integrated 5-year work plan and budget as we go through the next 8 years of this operation. We floated out so that it isn't a measure here. Let's do this right away. Slide, please. I talked earlier about robbing Peter to pay Paul. Your maintenance operation, as you know, does a tremendous job. Commissioner Pickering was just with one of our tremendous sweeper teams and got to see firsthand of some of the great challenges that that team works through. That being said, when it comes down to the summer-winter timeframe, we borrow from our other teams to supplement other requirements that come up during those timeframes. So our grade crew, we take people from our utility crews, which impacts our ability to do utility work across the board. And as you know, this last summer when we didn't do chip sealing, we were able to focus on a backlog of operations. But what was interesting is that we focused on those backlog of operations that opened up other backlogs. Because we all know when you open up the road, there's some weird things that come out of that. So you will see this next week on the consent agenda. I'm going to request, maintenance is going to request that you authorize us this year to bring in an additional 8 FTEs for our grade crews, 4 at Adams and 4 at Cloverdale. We'll have the appropriate justifications for there, but this is something that we know we need to do to just stay even when it comes down to the continuing growing challenges of maintenance. The great news is that based on the great job our fleet coordinators and Jennifer and her team have done, there's no extra maintenance equipment required. We have it all. We can make do with what we have. Nice to do stuff I don't go in for and such. So we're just looking for the bodies. Those are the dollars and cents associated with it. The trade-off, because of what we're dealing with temps, and we love our temps left and right, but the cost is going up. The recruitment is difficult. It's across all of Idaho. As a matter of fact, we think it's quite frankly across the nation. But at the same token, our request would be we will reduce the number of temps by 10 that we have in order to gain those 8 full-time operations, and we can provide a better operation for you all. But you'll see that next week on the agenda. Next slide, please. Let's go into compliance. This is what I call the go to jail. As you can see, we only look at really 2 areas: development and technical services and maintenance. That is where the majority of the state and federal requirements are in that says you will do this or there is a fine, be it stormwater, be it ADA, be it whatever drainage operations. So we are looking at, and you will see in the 22 budget, a request for in compliance only, 3 FTEs. Those are the numbers, and those are all in. Benefits, whole 9 yards. What we would never do is just come up and say, here's the cost for just the salary without sharing you what the total cost is. I think that's not ethical. And so you will see all these in the budget committees. It goes down by year as we move into it. Now, I did step out of the integrated 5-year work plan a little bit so that, again, sharing with you right up front what we're looking at in 27 and 28 when it comes down to those compliance issues. And the 27-28 supports the USTIC build-out if that remains on the timetable that we've shared with you earlier. Next slide, please. For mission critical, again, mission failure or severe degradation, there are a lot of numbers here. We've done the homework. You'll see these in your budget process. Last week, you received your presentation on the project team and such. You received your presentations several weeks ago. The requirements that maintenance is seeing now for just day-to-day, and then, of course, starting that build for that third chip seal team that we are going to have to stand up, and then, of course, starting the build-up for the USTIC and the Franklin additional operational centers. We go across the board from plans and projects, maintenance, D&T, and staff. You will see 3 on staff, and I believe maybe 1 more through 2028. Now, as you've seen in our budget process, and Commissioner Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner May, you've seen this in the past, we have maintained a 6 to 8% overhead when it comes down to operations, which is phenomenal. With this, we still maintain that 6% to 8% overhead when it comes down to all the numbers. And if you do the math, as I have, going through 2028, there are, when it's all said and done, there are 100 additional FTEs that we will be recommending. Out of those 100 FTEs, if my math is still good, a total of 7 will be for staff specific. Everything else is at operations and such, which is our focus here here at the County Highway District. Again, the numbers are on the side as to what the projected cost is, all in across the board. Next slide, please. Mission enhancement. Again, this is what we're looking at. The numbers are small. We've scrubbed the books very hard on this. And again, when I say FTE, in that budget process, in that integrated 5-year work plan, you will have the specific title, name, description across the board, and then relating to what that individual is recommended to do or that FTE is recommended to do when we come to you. This, again, was just an overview of the at about the 100,000-foot level. Next slide, please. And then, as I said earlier, mission enrichment, 0. I don't think it's appropriate for us to do a lot of nice to do if we had that opportunity. Those are things that if there's lots of time and lots of extra dollars running around, sure, we'll come back and say, this would be nice to do. But right up front, I will let you know that's not on our agenda as we move forward for the next 8 years through total build-out. Next slide. So, infrastructure and equipment costs. People are just not the key point. You've got to bring forth okay, this is what we're going to have to purchase to support those people and such across the board. This is a compilation of what you've already seen from the USTIC and the Franklin industrial complex developments that we are working through. We've broken them out by year and the dollars so that there are no surprises. You will start seeing these in the FY22 through 25, to 26 integrated 5-year work plan, and of course the FY22 and 23 budget for your review, recommendations, and discussions and directions. But again, I wanted to bring this right up front to say no surprises. Here's what we are looking at as we look between now and 2028 for your consideration. Next slide. Next slide, keep going. Next. Okay, so I said this earlier. Why is this a unique opportunity? I believe that we are truly in almost a once-in-a-lifetime time frame here at the Ada County Highway District. Why? Let's look at the funding that's going to be coming our way, and I'm looking at this from a very conservative side. Right now, the legislature has authorized, it is law, the governor has signed it, we'll be getting $8.5 million. Now, those $8.5 million is specifically targeted for construction, maintenance, reconstruction. I mean, that's the role we have to, I think as we understand it, and we'll get more clarity, that we'll have to do the same type of focus that we do with our HB 312 funding, which was the additional sales tax. And for Commissioner Pickering, Commissioner McKinney, we actually file a report at the end of the year that specifically articulates every penny back to LTAC, who then takes it to the legislature. That's one of the requirements. I don't know if they're going to do that with this one. I would hope not, but at the same token, but that does allow additional dollars to be considered from the general fund. So we actually have money coming in. You have tasked us, and justifiably so, to execute your budget at least at a 92% or greater rate. I will, again, I think I've shared this with you before, with all the things that are in front of your team right now, we're going to push hard. We will be very lucky if we execute at 92%. Let's say if we do, including encumbrances, all the different things we do across the board on this, that still leaves out of the $141 million, $11 million available. Now, what you elect to do with it, that'll be up to you. But my recommendation is, again, we have a very unique opportunity to invest now in increased capacity and capability that will go out toward the next 8 to 10 years. The legislative sales tax still being discussed. Very, my bet it's going through. And what we see right now, and I know I've shared this, is that the final version has a cap. I shouldn't say cap, a minimum cap. It is for ITD. For out of that extra 4.5% sales tax that's going to go to transportation out of the state's general fund, ITD will get $80 million. Anything over that, and they'll be able to bond under unless the legislation is changed here under the TECM issues. Anything above that goes to the locals. Right now, the first iteration, which will be in June or July, I think, is estimated that the locals will get $4 million. Now, it's a start. However, if you talk to the folks that are building this bill and the folks in the governor's office, which we have, the very conservative estimate in 5 years from now is $20 million. Some say it's 50. In 10 years, we're on par, depending upon the projected sales, the growth in Idaho, sales tax distribution, all those different things. We're projected to be, in the local area, on par with ITD, which is $80 million a year. Then we will get that district. I think we get 18% when it's all said and done. Do the math, and of course, this is all projection. That is another funding stream that's coming into the district that again will supplement the funding streams that you already have across the year. And then, of course, you have it in your purview to look at other funding opportunities, be it divesting yourself of infrastructure, looking at other cost things. And so we have a very unique opportunity in my mind at this point in time. And that's why we will be recommending to you these different steps phased over time to fund and increase the capacity here at the Ada County Highway District to answer those issues that I brought to you earlier. Next slide, please. So, in a nutshell, based on the homework that we've done, so that you don't fall over in your chairs when you see the budget indications and such, for the next 7 years, we've looked out. This is what the average is per year over 8 years when it comes down to all in the salary increases, compensation increases for the team members that we looked at. Bottom line number at the end of 8 years is a total of $6 million plus change. Equipment, again, to stand up those two facilities, to ensure that we're doing everything we need, it's a large number, but averages $6 million over the next 8 years. And as I said earlier, we've been very focused on ensuring that our overhead, when it comes down to staff versus the operational side, traffic, inspectors, maintenance, traffic, all these different things, we're going to stay between 6 and 8%, which is a great thing. So, Commissioners, that is here it is. First, and I'm watching Commissioner Goldthorpe very carefully. He keeps looking at that clock, and I'm well within the in the area. But what I wanted to do is give you, again, here it is. This is what you will be seeing as we walk through the budget and the integrated 5-year work process. Didn't want you surprised. And so with that, I can stand for any questions based on this presentation.
Dr. Wong, not necessarily a question because we don't have time for them, but as you go ahead and develop the budget to propose to us, I'd appreciate more detail, because I know it's coming, about what strings are attached to the monies that might come from the state.
Absolutely.
Because if they're like the 312 funds, we're going to have a lot of strings and a lot more pressure on our general revenue. And not like it's does us more harm than good at all, but it makes it much more difficult for us to execute the mission that the commission has established instead of the mission that the state wants us to establish.
Mr. President, again, very well said. And as you know, we will continue the tradition we have of being very specific. As a matter of fact, you can look forward to, again, a very long, lengthy, line by line, description by description, budget presentations that we will do through the year to get to your August final decision.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I do have one I think it's a fairly brief question. In your presentation, you talked about different categories of needs, mission critical needs, mission enhancement, and so on. I'm just trying to understand kind of what's the dividing line. You mentioned mission enhancement versus the bottom category that you said we don't even look at, the things that would be nice to do. What's kind of your dividing line for those? How do we define those?
Again, for the mission critical, those are things that if we do not execute these,
Right.
we're getting fined.
Right. No,
Easy
I
as
understand, and that makes perfect sense. I'm just further down the list.
On
how
the
we-
mission critical, if we are unable to build the capacity to answer those things, that means we're unable to do road maintenance. We're unable to do chip seal, or we have a severe mission degradation, i.e., I'll just say traffic engineering right now. We are unable to provide the service on a timely basis to the customer who says, I need this traffic control plan done here. Mission enhancement, if we are funding those, we can do these things better than what we've been able to do in the past. So that's the dividing line that I look for, and I hope that sort of answers your question.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of some examples of which sorts of things fall into one category versus the other.
ADA coordinator, mission, it's compliance. We don't have that, you're done. Mission critical, if I don't have a maintenance operation that can legitimately work, grade, utilities, name it all, it sits there, it fails. Mission enhancement, if you do not have the appropriate number of lawyers, I'll just leave it at that, then it gets, he's probably, if he's here, he's probably smiling behind me. Then we probably are not going to be doing as well as we do right now. If we don't have the same appropriate number of right-of-way technical folks, right-of-way stops, we are unable to do that. Mission in the next category, if I don't have an administrator and that supports a group, then that function continues to go to the wayside. That's how I kind of look at it from budget, but the focus is operations across the board. And I know that some of our deputy directors are sometimes not happy with me because at the end of the day, I will sacrifice numbers of staff to ensure that we're able to accomplish our mission for maintenance, development, and technical services, ADA, those sort of things first. And then we make do with the team members we have here to try and fill in everything else.
One thing that I'd like the new commissioners to understand about all those compliance areas that you talked about, they're all unfunded mandates from either the state, surprisingly enough, or the federal, which is kind of expected.
The commissioner is absolutely correct. For instance, air quality. We have to maintain an amazing sweeper force because if we don't, we go to non-containment in Ada County, and then those are bad things. Keeping the stuff off the road that potentially go into the river, that's another issue. We are the requirements continue to change, but we're not afforded the additional funding to meet those requirements. So quite frankly, commissioners, as you know, you take it out of the general fund and we make it work.
Okay,
Mr. President, is now 12 o'clock.
it is. And again, we'll welcome all the additional folks that have tuned in to this particular edition of the ACHD Commission meetings. And we will begin as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which one nation, indivisible, with liberty.
Thank you. And again, welcome, and we'll begin our meeting with entertaining a motion to accept and approve the agenda.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. I would like to say that I would like some time next week, I suppose, the next time we meet in public, so that we can discuss the rest of the commissioners' issues and input on what we just heard from the director. So I would make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
against? Nay? All in favor, motion passes. We will go ahead then and get to the consent agenda. And as you know, items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There won't be any separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or a member of the public so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Then we will get to our regular agenda item, and the first agenda item is resolution number 2339, a vacation exchange of public right-of-way at West Floating Feather Road, and a vacation dedication at 5655 West Floating Feather Road, Madera Investment. And this is a public hearing, and we will have a request for approval, and we are going to hear from our favorite right-of-way supervisor, Dave Serdar.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Commissioner President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor, Adair County Highway District. This is a public hearing and decision briefing for a vacation and exchange off of Floating Feather Road in Eagle, Idaho. ACHD received an application from Madera Development Incorporated. Vacation and exchange was required as part of the headquarters subdivision approval. Final plat will need to be approved after the vacation takes place. The vacation area is roughly 3/4 of an acre, and the exchange area is just barely above 1/4 of an acre. ACHD has received the $2,500 application fee. Final recording of the quitclaim deed and the resolution will not take place until ACHD receives the check for $57,989. This is an aerial view of the vacation. The vacation is this piece in red down here at the bottom. This vacation was actually established through a road book. The exchange is this piece in green on the top up near Floating Feather Road. This is more of a close-up view of the vacation, as you can see. The agreed upon price is $57,989. The value of the vacation area is $90,362, and the value of the exchange area is $32,373. ACHD has received confirmation from the applicant that they've agreed to pay the value. It is staff recommendation that we adopt and sign resolution number 2339, authorizing the proposed vacation of public right-of-way, as applicants have completed all commission and staff requirements. I will remain standing for any comments or questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Sirdar?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just by way of clarification, Mr. Serter, this slide says all requirements have been completed, but the previous one indicated that the money exchange had not yet taken place. Is that still where it is?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, yes, that is correct. They will still have to give us the check. I was thinking on terms of the initial requirements to get there.
Right, okay, all right. Just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. President?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, Dave, I have a question. This section of Floating Feather Road designated on this master street map as 3 lanes. Is that correct?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, that is correct.
So, and it looks like to the west there is a drainage swale and then a separated detached sidewalk. So is the assumption sidewalk would continue on towards the east along this property, which is where the dedication will take place?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Then, not hearing anybody else, is there someone from the applicant that has asked to speak?
Miss Mary Wall from Brecken Land Design. They are in full compliance with the staff report, and so unless a commission has questions for her, she doesn't.
Are there, being that they're in full support of this, but there is someone from the applicant here to address any questions from the commission, does the commission have any questions for them? No. Thank you for being here. Then we will, is there anyone from the public that's here to speak to this?
We do not have anyone signed up.
Then we'll close the hearing, and the matter is before the commission now for discussion and a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we approve resolution number 2339, vacation exchange of public right-of-way at West Floating Feather Road, and vacation dedication at 5655 West Floating Feather Road under the application of Madera Investment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this be accepted. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 2 on the regular agenda is Resolution 2338, also a public hearing for vacation of an easement located in Mission Subdivision in the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 9, Township 4, North Range 1, East Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. I can never find the address with that description. We will also hear from Dave Sirdar again with the staff report on this.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. Once again, for the record, this is David Serdar. I'm David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor for Ada County Highway District. This is actually a vacation and decision with a decision briefing for a vacation on First Street in Eagle. ACHD has received a vacation request from Brad and April Dillon as required for the Innovate Academy application. ACHD has received the $2,500 application fee, The commission had previously denied a waiver of building a cul-de-sac, but the applicant was given the option of pursuing a vacation. This is the vicinity slide of the vacation. The vacation is approximately 0.14 acres. As you can see, the proposed vacation is a cul-de-sac that is not currently constructed or built, but required by ACHD policy for dead-end streets over 150 feet in length. Since the staff report was published, there's been several letters and email communication in support of the vacation, copies of which have been sent to the commission. Here is a close-up view of the vacation. The size of the vacation is what would precisely be needed for the cul-de-sac. It is staff recommendation that the commission not sign resolution 2338 as the after condition of the vacated right-of-way does not meet ACHD policy. I will remain standing for any questions or comments.
Mr. Serdar, so in essence, nothing has really changed from the last time we heard about this particular piece of property.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, that is correct.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Serdar for this particular matter?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Dave, thanks for your presentation and introduction to this. Could you remind me which part of ACHD policy does this not align with?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, I don't have the specific reference to that specific policy. I mean, like the, policy X and X, but as required on a dead-end street, a turnaround needs to be constructed that is 150, if this street right there is 150 feet long.
And do we have requirements of what that turnaround, like radius or diameter, would be? That's different from this?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, for the record, my name is Justin Lucas, Deputy Director here at the Ada County Highway District. The answer is yes, we do have specific requirements for permanent turnarounds that we have here at the Highway District. The dimensions of those turnarounds are outlined in our policy, and the only permanent turnaround that we allow is a cul-de-sac turnaround.
Another question, this might be for you, Dave, but do we have any notice from the neighbors that would be impacted by this? Have they been consulted with this application at any point?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so when we receive an application for a vacation, notices do go out, and we did receive some communication just recently from the neighbors, and this was sent to you, I believe, yesterday, just some email communication back and forth between the neighbors. And they were, in summary, I believe 2 of the neighbors responded that they definitely want to see a turnaround at the end of this, at the end of this street.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question, and this might be for the applicant, but in the items that we received yesterday with the neighborhood meeting, and I realize we have to notice out for a certain radius for comments, but I just see one Mr. and Mrs. Compton that from First Street Do we have any other communication from any of the other homeowners there on First Street? Mr. Roberts, he did send in something in support of it. He is on the other side of Mission, and so not directly impacted there on First Street. So that's my question. Have we heard from anybody else on First Street?
Dave? Or Justin?
All of the communication we have from the public is included in the information that we provided to the commissioner. So President Goldthorpe, Commissioner May, you have what we have on that. The applicant may have a report on other conversations they have had, but that would have to come from the applicant.
Thank you.
As I was thinking. Thank you very much, Justin.
Justin, really quick, one more question. How wide is this street, and how wide are the lanes? Do you know?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, I'm not going to be able to give you an exact measurement off the top of my head, but looking at that street, this is an older street that's been there a long time. I don't see sidewalks. The pavement width on something like this is, I'll throw a number out there. It's probably around 30 feet. You know, give or take. It's not a wide. It's a local, a relatively narrow local street.
Perfect, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think this may be a question also for Justin. If the request for the vacation is not approved, will the property owner be obligated to build the cul-de-sac?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, yes, that would be consistent with the condition that the commission required as part of the previous development application. There was basically a condition that had either build the cul-de-sac or receive a vacation, apply for a vacation and receive that vacation, and provide an alternative turnaround, which would be a subsequent negotiation with staff on the type of alternative turnaround that there would be. But that would be it's kind of a stepwise process that the applicant is going through. But to be clear, if you follow staff's recommendation and you do not vacate the right-of-way, the applicant is required to build the cul-de-sac as part of their development.
Let me then go one step further. If the vacation were, well, if an alternative type of turnaround were to be considered, that would necessitate that we deny the vacation for that to be then considered as a next step. Am I correct on that?
Correct. President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, correct.
Okay.
The only way that staff can or would consider an alternative turnaround is if the commission chooses to vacate the right-of-way. Because the commission was very clear last time, they requested a waiver not to build the cul-de-sac, and the commission denied that waiver. So that's how the conditions are laid out in their development staff report. But to be very clear, before you today is only the decision on whether to vacate the right-of-way or not. We're not here today to discuss an alternative turnaround, the dimensions of that turnaround. That would be something that would be taken care of at the staff level after the commission takes action, if you go in that direction.
All right. Is there any other communication from the commission? Nope. In that case, is there anyone here from the applicant, Stacy?
Yes, we have Brittany Elliott representing the applicant.
Okay. Brittany, the time is yours.
Here, we'll stop this share just to. Brittany, you're still on mute.
Thanks, Stacy.
Here we go.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brittany Elliott, 855 West Broad Street, Suite 300, Boise, Idaho, 83702. And I'm here today to request a vacation on behalf of Innovate Academy. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying thank you so much to Stacy and Dave and for all the hard work that they've helped us with on this project. As Dave stated, this project is located over in Eagle, Idaho. It is on the southwest corner of Eagle Road and Mission Drive. The Innovate Academy purchased the property back in 2020 from the City of Eagle, and all improvements to date were completed at time of purchase. You'll notice here that this is the actual area to be vacated, as Dave stated. You'll notice in the red hatched area, that is the area that we're requesting the vacation for today. We have received neighborhood support. We held our neighborhood meeting in November of 2020, and we did receive 4 people who were interested in that neighborhood meeting. They did attend that neighborhood meeting, and all 4 of those neighbors did provide letters of support that you'll see on the screen in front of you. We did do the required notice to all of the affected neighbors, and we had 4 people who showed up at the neighborhood meeting expressing interest and support. Additionally, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll notice that Idaho Power had no objections to the easement as well. We've also received a letter of support from the City of Eagle that they do not have any future plans for the use of the cul-de-sac right-of-way located at the terminus of North First Street, and they do not object to the vacation of this property. Additionally, we've also received a letter of support from the fire chief. He has provided the letter that you see on screen there in support of the vacation. While they will need a way to turn around at the terminus of the street, he did provide comments, and while today we are focusing on the vacation, we did feel that it was important to include the comments that the fire chief requested. This would be he requested a hammerhead type design, about 120 feet wide and 28 feet in depth. So basically, the fire trucks would be able to turn around at that terminus if the vacation is approved. We would construct something similar to what you see on screen in front of you. The vacation would also allow the continued safe access for the children to be picked up and dropped off. You'll notice here that the parents currently do come down on Mission Drive. They come in double stacked on the school property, and then the pickup and drop off is fully staffed at all times. Parents enter in one direction and leave on the other. By vacating the right-of-way right here in the middle of the property, that would allow for that continued safe access for both children and parents. It's also important to note that this building right here in the middle no longer exists. That is that church that the City of Eagle did remove. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for all of your time today, and I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I do have a question. Hi, Brittany. It's nice to see you again. The application states Brad and April Dillon. Are they interchangeable with the Academy? You're referencing Innovate Academy, so.
They are the property owners who has a rental agreement with Innovate Academy. So on behalf of Innovate Academy and the Dillons, I'm here representing both of them today.
Okay. And then just one other quick question. I remember when you were in before, and it was to address the drainage issue. And at that time, you had stated that you weren't sure if the Academy was going to be there long-term, or they would be there in a year or two, and then you would reassess about mitigating the drainage. Has that changed at all? Are you thinking more long-term for the school there now, or still kind of weighing it?
At this point in time, I'm not, obviously the leasing person on this particular property. However, we are currently school is in session there, and as far as I know, they will be continuing to be there in session. I don't. Okay. Long-term plans are still up for grabs.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany.
Okay.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Hey, Brittany, thank you for being here and presenting. couple questions. So that letter that you had with the neighbors that had signed that, I saw the date, it was 2020, and it's not very clear to me, what were they, I mean, was that letter of support that they were signing on, was that just for Innovate Academy to be there? How was it connected to this cul-de-sac and the vacation of this right-of-way?
Oh, absolutely. So this neighborhood meeting was specific to the vacation request, and you'll notice the subject of the letter is the First Street vacation request. I'm trying to blow it up here a little bit so that way you're able to see it a little bit better. I did put them all on one big slide.
Perfect, thank you. That helps a lot.
No problem.
Mr. President, one follow-on question, please.
Yes.
Brittany, you probably heard earlier when I mentioned the support letters from the neighborhood. Have you heard from any of the other homeowners, property owners on First Street besides just the Comptons? That was a question I had.
Personally, on the vacation, I have not. Once we did the notice, we hold the neighborhood meetings. Typically, people who are interested either will show up at the neighborhood meeting or will contact me directly to let me know that, you know, they have a question or they have a concern. But typically, people who are interested will definitely show up at that neighborhood meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yeah. Yes, Jim?
Oh, yeah, just I want to clarify, Ms. Elliott. So you have agreed with the fire department that if this were vacated, that you would enter into a permanent easement for that hammerhead turnaround that they're requesting, and that you would then record that as part of the property records.
Yes, we would be constructing that turnaround or constructing that hammerhead, and then also whatever associated easements would need to occur.
So you'd be recording it, comes to permanently attached to the property for subsequent owners. They would be subject to the same thing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Jim, we have a bit of a clarification from our general counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Steve Price, General Counsel. Again, today's application is simply for the vacation of the right-of-way. Any future proposals in terms of turnaround hammerheads would have to go through a separate process. Currently, the hammerhead does not meet ACHD policy, and that would likely have to come back to the Commission for any additional approval.
While you're here, Steve, what I'm hearing with the support from some of the neighbors and not from others, and the question was asked about the drainage, and which is a long-term, would require some long-term vision on this. And it appears to me we're being asked to make a long-term decision for what might be a short-term problem. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Mr. President, most certainly you can view it in that fashion, but we don't take those things into consideration on a simple request for vacation. The question that is before the Commission right now solely is it in the public's best interest to remove, to vacate the public right-of-way? That is the sole determination. And then the question is compensation.
Thank you.
So, Mr. President, I have a question of Mr. Price. I'm a little confused. Yeah, so if I own a piece of property and I want to enter into an agreement only with the fire department to provide easement to them, I have ACHD to get approval?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, since we're responsible for the public health and safety, and typically the turnarounds are a requirement for our roads, it would be something that we would expect to review. I do appreciate your question, and that is, how can we prevent a private easement dedicated to the fire district? I understand that, but that's outside our jurisdiction and our policy.
Thank you. That was my question.
No, that answers my question.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the commission? Are there any questions, further questions for staff or for the applicant? Stacy, is there any?
Yes, we have a Mr. John Compton signed up to speak.
Okay, Mr. Compton, the time is yours. You have 3 minutes. And if you would,
Thank you.
if you give your name and address, that would be appreciated.
Of course. Thank you, sir. My name is John Compton, and I live at 266 North 1st Street, second house south of the property in question. Jude Thomas, the property immediately adjacent to the Dillon property, is also in alignment with our thoughts. This is probably mostly due to my ignorance of the ACHD processes, but you know, we want to support the academy. They're good neighbors, but it just seems like it's the cart before the horse to vacate it without first having an appropriate design that's approved by ACHD and permanently affixed by easement to the property that meets all the requirements. We're content with the hammerhead concept. You know, as long as a fire truck can turn around, most everything else can turn around. But if vacating the property leaves in question what happens next, then we're kind of uncomfortable with that. So it might just be an education process where you teach me the process, but you know, our 3 requirements are that the street remains a dead end and the hammerhead meets that expectation. The turnaround be adequate. Hammerhead meets that expectation. And that the turnaround is permanent, meaning that no future property owner could eliminate that turnaround or cause the road to not be a dead end. I guess those are my comments. And in the letter that Stacy was showing before, it explicitly said, I support this as long as it meets those expectations, which were outlined in a letter that was attached to that letter. So I'll take your comments. I'll mute myself and I'll take your comments offline.
Before Steve answers the question that's mulling around in my mind, I'll try to make my question, see if I was correct. If we deny this vacation, can this hammerhead concept still be worked out with staff?
Well, it is, excuse me, Mr. President, for the record, Steve Price, Commissioners. It is a condition, if you recall, in the prior staff report with the development application. But also, in many vacations, we can provide conditions in improving a vacation, and that is that they would be required to do certain things. It isn't just many times, so in this case, we could require that they provide an easement, and it's built consistent with what the fire department has requested. So I appreciate the difficulty. This has been very difficult for staff. We had the development application, we've had the vacation requests. They both interchange. It's kind of, you know, chicken and egg. And the vacation has to be interpreted separately. But one thing that you can do is condition it upon an easement to ACHD and/or the fire department, because the original staff condition requires a permanent easement to ACHD. Or you can require them to come back and apply to meet ACHD's policy, to meet the conditions of the original staff report. We would review it, and that the design would likely come back to the commission for your approval.
All right, all the commissioners. have
Mr.
heard that.
President?
Yes.
Mr. President, I guess I'm a little bit confused here, hearing that the hammerhead does not meet policy. So the latter recommendation from Mr. Price, that if we were to approve the vacation with them to come back for the discussion about the turnaround and work towards making that consistent with our policy, that to me sounds more reasonable, because we've just been told the hammerhead does not meet our policy. So I'm reluctant to approve a vacation with a hammerhead turnaround if we already know going into this that does not meet our policy. So it is a little bit of the chicken and the egg thing, but is anybody else a little bit confused about
Gary is not.
what exactly?
Gary
Yeah.
has been chomping at the bit.
At the bit, yeah.
To
I'm
answer
just
this
reluctant
question.
to include the hammerhead, hearing that it does not meet our policy. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Gary Enselman, Deputy Director, Development Technical Services. Chomping at the bit may be an exaggeration, but hopefully I can clarify this a little bit. In the action on the development application, they had requested a waiver of the cul-de-sac. The Commission denied that. Then the requirement was construct the turnaround, the cul-de-sac, or vacate the existing right-of-way for the cul-de-sac, subject to the construction of a turnaround at the terminus of First Street, and a permanent right-of-way easement would be provided for any portion of the turnaround located outside of the right-of-way. So they can, if you approve the vacation of the right-of-way, they would be required to build an alternative turnaround design subject to our review and approval, and dedicate a permanent easement to the public for the area of that turnaround so that it could be used by emergency services, the public, other drivers. The question on what turnarounds meet our policy for a permanent turnaround only specifically lists a cul-de-sac. And that's because normally with a new subdivision or other type of development, that's the type of turnaround that we get. We don't have any other approved designs. It does leave a provision that we can consider alternative turnarounds on a case-by-case basis. If you approve the vacation, they can submit a request to staff for a hammerhead type design or other alternative that meets the requirements of the fire department and the public. We can review that at the staff level and issue the approvals and record the required easements and inspect the construction of that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
So thank you, Mary. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Mary, for piping up, because I'm also a little confused. So let me just kind of hopefully clarify what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if I'm understanding incorrectly or correctly. So it seems like we have two courses of action. It's either deny this appeal. I mean, yeah, don't accept this resolution. Sorry, I'm mixing things up. Deny the vacation. But does that mean that they can always come back to reconsider a different configuration? That's one option that seems to be on the table. And then the second option is we grant them the vacation, but we work out that design element as well. Are those the two options? Am I understanding that correctly?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, as I would understand it, if you deny the vacation and they, through some other application process, come back with an alternative, then they have to come back and vacate the portion of the right-of-way anyway if they're not building a cul-de-sac. If that's the desire of the commission, the cleanest way is to approve the vacation, which requires them to come back and design and build an alternative turnaround that we will have to approve, and they will have to dedicate an easement to the public for any portion of that outside of the existing right-of-way.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Unless somebody else has another question for him. Guess not.
Thank you, Gary.
Ms. Tracy Crane has just asked to speak.
Ms.
Do
Crane,
not have address for the record.
you're on. You have 3 minutes. And
All right,
thank you for coming.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Tracy Crane. I am here on behalf of Brad and April Dillon. And I just wanted to address a couple of things that have come up. The first is with respect to
I'm
the
sorry,
turnaround.
Mr. Crane, can you give me an address for the record, please?
Yes, 9599 West Fairview Avenue, Boise, Idaho, 83704.
Thank you.
The hammerhead turnaround design that was presented today is the hammerhead turnaround design from the International Fire Code, which is the code that is followed by the Eagle Fire Department and by and large the fire districts in the state of Idaho. So that's not a silk of the hand, whole cloth kind of design. The other thing that I'd like to address is the tenure of the school, how long it intends to be there. The school is experiencing significant interest from the community, and at this point, the long-term vision of the school is to be a long-term presence at this location. So it's not something where the school expects to be gone in a year or two. They hope to develop into a permanent establishment. And this is an area that they'd like to use for their elementary and potentially some middle school activities. So the other issue that I thought was interesting was that, and that the commissioners may want to consider, as Mr. Price noted, the question is in this in the best interest of the public? This is a right-of-way easement that's been present on this property for 4 decades plus, and it's never been developed. It's never been in the interest of the public to develop it. And now it's sitting here, and only at this stage have we decided that, hey, wait a minute, perhaps it is in the interest to develop. Also, if you note on the maps provided and on the more accurate assessor records, the right-of-way as it exists is bigger than the first street width going into it. So if Innovate or the Dillons were required to construct this right-of-way, it would be a mismatch with the existing street. And that would then, I guess, I don't know ACHD's requirement on this, would they have to then expand the street to the full width of the right-of-way along First Street at the front of these properties so that the right-of-way that is currently designed and apparently within policy could be constructed. So, you know, when we're talking about the public interest, I think those are important considerations. And I think that they weigh substantially in favor of vacating this cul-de-sac with the condition, as was suggested, that a permanent turnaround be constructed that is in compliance with the facilities that will be using the turnaround, which of course would be the fire department. And then it would be open, and so residents would be able to also turn around at the end of the street much more efficiently than they've been able to do for the last 4 decades. Those are all I have. That's all I have to say, but I'm willing to answer your questions.
Are there any questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Crane. Is there anyone else, Stacy? No. Okay. Then we will close the public hearing, and the matter is now before the commission for discussion and a motion.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. President, I would move that we adopt Resolution 2338 and vacate the property described therein.
Any conditions? And here comes our general counsel with some counsel.
If I get a second, I'll be happy to debate the motion.
Mr. President, Commissioners, again, as the prior discussion, staff has requested that it be conditioned upon the previous conditions that are in the staff report regarding the dedication of the easement consistent with Mr. Inselman's testimony. It's in the staff report that's provided to you today.
Would you include that in your motion, Commissioner Hanson?
So here's my problem, is that, Mr. President, is that we required this applicant to built a cul-de-sac in that previous staff report. And I raised this issue of why aren't we vacating this? And oh, that's a separate procedure. So now we finally have the vacation, but we want the previous conditions imposed on this. To me, this road functions as a private road. It has 4 houses on it. There are many, many, many roads throughout our county that end in dead ends that have far more houses and units on them. It defies logic that we should insist on the letter of our policy that this cul-de-sac be constructed after 40 years. I see no justification for not vacating this and then letting the property owners figure out with the city and the fire department whatever they want for the appropriate access. So I'd like to see this property vacated, as I indicated when this was originally brought to us in a development application.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson. Is there a second for Commissioner Hanson's motion?
I'll second.
Mr.
Yes.
President,
Yes.
before we take a vote on this particular motion, I would have to say that I cannot see simply vacating without any conditions, as Commissioner Hanson is suggesting here. At the very least, there are 2 options here. The one option would be to follow the staff's recommendation and deny the request for vacation. And the only possible alternative I can see would be to allow the vacation with conditions imposed that an alternative type of turnaround be designed and constructed and approved by ACHD through, I presume, a waiver process of some sort, since it's not a cul-de-sac. But I cannot see simply vacating as it's being requested without any conditions.
Are you making a
Commissioner
substitute?
McKinney, yeah. I was just going to ask if he was making a substitute motion. If so, I would be happy to second that.
Yes, I would be willing to move that we approve Resolution 2338 for the vacation as described, with the condition that the property owner apply for and receive approval for an alternative type of turnaround and grant the appropriate easement for that. Am I missing anything? Okay, that would be my motion.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a substitute motion in front of us, which needs to be acted upon before the first motion. And regarding the substitute motion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries.
I vote no.
Thank you. All right.
Then because the substitute motion passed, we are not actually taking a vote on the original motion.
Exactly.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Even with the substitute motion, can there still be discussion before voting?
We've already voted.
Oh, I know that, but I'm just saying for future reference.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, then we're done with our regular agenda. What we have left is the section for public communications. Stacy, are there any that have signed up for public communications?
We do not have anybody signed up.
Then our meeting is adjourned. We'll take a 5-minute recess to prepare for executive sessions.
Yes.
the, we will do the salt shed first.
Okay. I'll load the. Turn the zoom off.
Grab this and talk like this.
No. You are welcome because it's a more informal. You can sit down over there. There's a mouse. Are you first? Mics are hot.
Are the commissioners all back? Hey, Jim? Mary, you there?
Here.
All right, then
I'm
we'll
here.
go ahead
I'm
and
here.
we'll begin again. And I almost forgot the work sessions today, and Ross looked really disappointed because this is his swan song, as it were. Probably. More than likely. We have a work session now that will deal with the subject of speed mitigation and traffic calming. And Ross, take it away.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. A little closer, or bring the mic a little closer. Better? Are we okay now? All right. President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, I'm Ross Oyen, Traffic Engineering Supervisor, briefing today on speed mitigation and traffic calming. And I'll apologize in advance. I'll be looking past you at my slides a little bit. So outline of the presentation today, just a brief review of policy. Talk about traffic calming to manage speed, types of mitigation devices we can use, some related actions that are not traffic calming devices that can help us manage speed in some cases, and then just a brief mention of some things that we're doing that are rather beyond the policy, and so we'll get right into it. Our traffic calming policy is specific to residential, local, or collector streets, posted at 30 miles per hour or lower, minimum length of 750 feet, minimum daily volume of 400, maximum daily volume of 4,000, and that's more the collector end of things. We evaluate speed data. Every time we get a traffic calming request, we collect data, we evaluate the volume and the speed data. If we determine that one element of the traffic calming policy is met, then we can ask our applicant to provide support from the neighborhood. And upon receipt of the support, we perform a cut-through study, and that cut-through study is used to determine whether ACHD will participate financially in mitigation. And this is geared, probably historically been geared a little bit more towards the installation of speed bumps, humps, cushions. So traffic calming to manage speed. You're getting my rule number one. If you want to change speeds, change the street. And there really is not a rule number two in my experience. So let's talk about ways in which we can change the street. Vertical deflection is a term that's actually used in national publication, an e-primer for traffic calming, but it's bumps, humps, cushions, tables, and we've applied them. They work. They actually do help manage speed. They are not necessarily popular even with people who ask for them. They are just what it takes to get the job done. Spacing on them is important. On local streets, 300 to 400 feet is a pretty good spacing in order to get the speeds down and keep them consistent throughout the segment of interest. They are also an effective spot treatment. We've done a couple of raised crosswalks, and so that's applying the vertical deflection at a very specific point of need, where we have a school crossing, something of that nature. We know we get the speed management benefit, and so that works great. It is always important, and I always try when we talk about traffic calming to remind everybody that emergency responder input is crucial. Depending upon response routes, we hear from ambulance and fire crews that how we do it or where we do it can be important to their ability to respond. So another means of changing the street is horizontal deflection, doing some things at the roadway edges or in the middle. And so mid-block and or intersection type treatments can be chicanes. The ones shown here on Irene Street. They're typically 3 elements, couple of or 2 curb extensions on one side of the street, 1 on the other, alternating, that cause a bit of deflection in vehicle path and have the effect of calming speeds. Variation on that is a lateral shift where you use a median island with curb extensions. We have that on 15th Street, just north of Fort, where we have curb extensions now at Residue, and we have the large median island that deflects northbound traffic on 15th Street. In these elements, bikes are usually sharing the vehicle lane, and that is an important consideration as we talk about traffic calming. Horizontal deflection at intersections. We've done some roundabouts here in the county. They become more refined over time. We certainly think that just based on safety performance, they're good. They provide that by design sort of element of slowing upon entry into the roundabout, and that is important. Mini roundabouts, the next one we do will be the first one we've done in terms of building them through the highway district. But they should function the same way. They'll look different, won't have necessarily all of the same attributes as a full roundabout, but there will be yield on entry, circulate to the right, and people who are already in the intersection have the right of way. And we want to do that so it's consistent. When drivers encounter a circular thing, they know how to respond.
Got a question for you, Ross. A while back, we had a request from our pedestrian advisory group to demo some temporary mini roundabouts in I think it was the north end, to do a proof of concept, as it were, to see if we could slow some folks down there. Do you know if those have been established yet, or when they're going to be?
President Goldthorpe, no, not at this time, and I don't know the exact timeline. We've had a little bit of a disconnect just at the staff level in terms of keeping line of communication with the applicant there, but I think the intention is to try and get that to go forward yet this summer.
Okay, yeah, I would appreciate that happened, because I know disconnects happen, but it's been quite a while since that request was.
Yes, I certainly, I feel your pain there. We just as soon keep this moving forward. But yeah, it would be very interesting to do a proof of concept and then see how broadly we can apply. And in other terms, how inexpensively or expensively we can apply as well, just so we understand the whole implication of the concept.
Sure, I think that we'd probably be wise to do them in a number of places throughout the county, just to get a good kind of a study going on that. But that's another discussion.
All right, shall I continue?
You bet.
All right, so another thing we can do is sort of taking the island in the intersection at the right there and using that, not the other chicane elements, but just a bump at the head of the T as an element by which we can use some markings, centerline markings, and stop control as needed to realign the intersection, not really change things beyond the footprint of the intersection, but force a change in path for people on the cross of the T, And again, that's been shown to have some speed benefits. We haven't done anything exactly like that I can recall in the county, but again, it's a tool, and I think we may have a couple of applications for those. So going forward, probably see one of those too, or more.
Thank you.
And so another means of changing the street, and this is more intersection specific, is intersection bulb outs. Curb extensions generally can be used either at intersections or not, but at intersections we've done bulb outs recently with some of our downtown projects. We are looking to do more. The State Street project that we're working on right now will introduce many more. I love them because they improve the visibility of and for pedestrians. They also allow us to get, in some cases, signs in better places to supplement the messaging that we're given to the public. They don't necessarily always result in reduced speeds for a through vehicle on an uncontrolled approach, but they always have that benefit of the improved visibility, and they reduce the turning speeds and set the path of the turning vehicles in a way that the drivers are more likely to keep pedestrians in the line of sight. In a non-intersection application, curb extensions are often called chokers. They're again a good application for mid-block crosswalks where you have a desire line for pedestrians to cross the street in a mid-block location. One way to make them more visible, minimize the amount of time that they're actually in the roadway and crossing, and make them more, or make drivers more aware of them, is to go ahead and push those curb extensions out.
Ross, is that kind of what we did on Cherry Lane and Fair and Meridian next to the library?
No, we weren't really able to do anything there just because of the fully developed cross-section on that section of Cherry.
It just looked like we did a great job of slowing people down right there.
President Goldthorpe, I would hope so. I mean, that's the sort of the point of the process there with PHB and the advanced warning devices that you have, and certainly where we have these things applied in school zones. That's what we're trying to do, is get people's attention and let them know that this is a location where they need to be on their toes.
Yeah, that island didn't hurt either.
Mr. President, I have one little question on the curb extensions and so on at intersections. And I'm just thinking in terms of, and I'm not sure exactly what my question is, but I'm thinking in terms of large trucks. And when you put those curb extensions, you decrease, don't you? You decrease the effective turning radius at the intersection. How do we deal that with respect to large trucks? Or are they simply, do they just go to minimums as far as, truck turning radius?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, great question. There certainly we have to, in a downtown or a commercial environment in particular, we have to take into account the presence of large vehicles, and so we don't want to make these things so intrusive, if you will, that by necessity large vehicles are going to have to trail wheels over the bulb outs themselves. That is not a fair trade.
Right, especially if you've got pedestrians standing right there. And I've seen situations kind of like that.
Yeah, correct. And that can, yes, that can be quite a challenge, even where we don't have bulb outs in some locations. So it is something that we have to take into consideration. But we also, oftentimes, and if we look at say, our downtown grid, we typically have more than one lane that the turning vehicle can turn from, or more than one receiving lane that the turning vehicle can turn into with our one-way streets, at least in our downtown grid. They take the whole street when they need to for that brief period of time, and that's disruptive to operations in the moment, but is perfectly acceptable when you look at it from a big picture standpoint. So as long as our curb design isn't interfering with their ability to do those things, it's a good trade. And the last thing I would mention about chokers is how much effect you get on speed with those really comes down to how tightly you choke the traffic. If you want to get it down to a one car at a time sort of a scenario, obviously you have a potentially quite a big speed benefit, but you would not do such a thing on a street with much traffic volume on it. And so things that are really not traffic calming devices, if you look at publications and look at how we evaluate things, there are some actions that help, sometimes in the right circumstances, and so I'll speak to that a little bit here. So signal timing to manage progression speeds, and we did this downtown when we last did our update of the signal timing in the downtown grid. We actually modified the progression speeds, the speed at which a proceeding vehicle would encounter a green signal if they started from a green signal. We backed those off a little bit, and really our finding was we got lower speeds, a little bit lower speeds, but the corridor travel times really did not change. In fact, I think we had a slight improvement. So that's a tool we can use. It is limited. It's limited to closely spaced signal networks. So it's not something we're going to get to go to Meridian and apply on, on half-mile space signals or something. Alternating stop signs in our gridded neighborhoods. So the north end and the east end and parts of South Boise, Central Bench, and the west end have sort of traditional residential street grids. Back 20 years or so ago, none of those streets had stop control on them at most of the local intersections. So one of the things we found is there was some crash history and there was some dissatisfaction with the conflicts that were occurring at these local street intersections, low volume streets, but nevertheless there were conflicts and there were some crashes. So we went ahead after quite a bit of public dialogue with alternating stop control on our local streets in these areas, and that essentially made it 2 blocks between stop signs. So it helped manage the practical limit of what speed could be in the intervening space. So they're not traffic calming devices, and I don't want to use stop signs as traffic calming because there are too many situations where the stop signs don't work well for that purpose. But yet it's a tool. We've tried to apply it. If we find more locations where we think we can apply it, we'll continue to do so. And then the last thing, and this is one I will put big caveat with it, radar feedback signs. We implemented nearly 100 of these things a couple, 3 fiscal years ago. And what we found, we weren't able to find much in the literature that really told us exactly what to expect. When we applied them, we found that in some locations where we put the feedback signs in, when we compared before speeds and after speeds, speeds went up. Not what we had in mind. In some cases, we found that, that there weren't really of much benefit, but in sort of limited cases where the speeds are much higher than the posting on 2-lane roadways, 1 lane each direction, They appear to have some benefit. So that's our little window of opportunity to use radar feedback signs to assist us. And we may indeed continue to ask for some funds to go ahead and implement those on case-specific basis, where we're hearing from the public and we go out and we measure and we say, yep, by gosh, that's right. This is a spot where we think we might have some benefit. Benefits are not usually too dramatic, but a benefit's a benefit. So, and so beyond the traffic calming policy, the policy really, again, I'll go back to the start and say the policy is really structured around local residential streets and collector residential streets. What if a street's more than residential? What if it has other land use elements attached to it? What if the street has an historic role in the community or in the transportation system? And what if the street falls at the higher end of the volume range? Well, at that point in time, you're kind of leaving traffic engineering behind, and you are, or at least my group, behind, and we're really getting more into the community programs aspect of things. And so we've done that with, with a couple of projects. Those have kind of moved through our community programs process, and we've developed 13th Street traffic calming projects. So this piece is really sort of limp north, or the Camel's Back area, where we're looking at doing some bulb outs and pedestrian crossing treatments and ramp improvements and those sorts of things. And Kootenai Street, quite a history and quite a concept that has come out of that history with Kootenai Street. So the recommended concepts that the commission has approved: narrow the vehicle lanes from 11 feet to 10 feet. Now, and I will say that is, I think, a good site-specific recommendation to Kootenai Street. I don't think we can map that over to a quarter mile to Overland Road or on the west end to Orchard Street. But a narrowing of vehicle lanes in order to improve some of the other values that we have on the street in terms of bike and pedestrian facilities is really appropriate to the case. And in addition to that, we're looking at implementation of some chicane and bulb out treatments. Finally getting a sidewalk on Kootenai, where much of that street has not had it for many years, and installing a school crossing treatment. So that's an integrated approach to traffic calming in a corridor, and does not have a vertical element to it. So in summary, the policy really is there for us to assess the conditions, the speeds, the volumes, and the presence of sidewalks, and compare that to our policy standards, our policy guidelines, and help make some decisions. Neighborhood buy-in is a key component of our process. We really want the public, the owners, to support whatever it is that we do out there. There are a lot of ways to mitigate speed. We've leaned heavily traditionally on the vertical because it's quick, easy, relatively inexpensive, doesn't require a design process, and it's effective. But my phrase here is more tolerated than loved, and I think I'm probably being a little bit optimistic even with that. The horizontal element, chicanes, islands, can be trickier to fit to existing conditions, but can be effective, and we've undertaken them. If we look at the history of what we've done on 15th Street, it took a long time to get there, but we've got to a point where we managed the top end of the speed distribution with the median island, curb extensions, and then smaller median islands every other block up the street. So we got some benefit out of it. It's a more design and funding intensive process, but it works. And roundabouts and minis, good track record nationally for roundabouts generally. Minis, when they come, will be new to us here at the district in terms of us implementing them. But they show great promise, and I have no reason to believe they won't work. I think they'd be another tool in the kit, and that's great. Bulb outs and chokers. What I finally told our planning and programming folks was, let me be clear, as a traffic engineer, I love bulb outs. But you have to go talk to the drainage engineer, and you have to go talk to the maintenance staff, and you have to have those conversations so that when we get it right. But the thing I like about the bulb outs and chokers, I think I elaborated on enough. There are benefits beyond just speed reduction that I think are important with them. And lastly, we have those higher volume streets out there. They are really were not intended to be totally covered by our traffic calming policy. And so those are the ones that will tend to come forward for further consideration at staff level, at the commission level, and they require a level of outreach and consideration that, again, can be very worthwhile, but isn't applicable to every location. Certainly we want to be cautious in how we do traffic calming on streets of that nature, so that we don't have the parallel street issue of diverting traffic off of one street to another in essentially chasing or moving a challenge. But that said, definitely a place, I think, in the program going forward for this. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Ross? And I have one comment, and that is a big thank you. This is, we've had a number of work sessions lately that have been highly illuminating, and this is one of them.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. President, I do have a couple of questions. Ross, thank you for this presentation. What do we do at ACHD in the application stage to identify potential traffic calming issues with, say, a new subdivision or the like?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney. In the application process, actually, the development policy really limits the straight run of street that we would typically want to have within a new subdivision development. That's one element of the process, is to just keep the streets from being built in ways in which they can become raceways, if you will, or likely speed challenges. So that's policy specific. Certainly the development staff is looking in, on occasion collaborating with us to ask what sort of traffic calming elements can be integrated into the project or into the process. And I should mention also that development policy now allows, at the request of the cities, allows narrower street cross sections. And so that, combined with street parking alone, can be pretty useful to help sort of hem in the driver's perspective and encourage lower speeds. So just going from the 36 foot to the 32 or 33 foot street cross section can be useful in that regard as well.
So there's no specific procedural procedure by which all new applications get reviewed by a traffic engineer to specifically identify. It's sort of an ad hoc approach in which development will ask questions of your traffic engineers and get input, just sort of here and there.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
There's no official review. Okay.
No, sir.
Because I wonder if that might be a wise policy, that every application gets reviewed, because, my, just having a little bit of background in highway and transportation engineering, it strikes me that a skilled traffic engineer could look at a new subdivision plan and fairly quickly identify, here's some problem locations, here's another problem location. If we change the design here, if we modify this there, we could eliminate the need for, or the likelihood that, 5 years from now or 2 years from now, when the subdivision is built, the residents move in and, we get a lot of complaints, and then we have to go back in and retrofit or, make modifications, as opposed to, building it right the first time. And that's kind of, I'm hopeful that we can build things right the first time, because I've lived in neighborhoods where I look at a street and I say, yeah, we've got traffic calming issues here. Why in the world did they design it this way? Why didn't they do something different? And I wonder if it might be wise for ACHD to simply implement a blanket policy that all new applications, a new subdivision has to be at least given the once-over by one of our traffic engineers to identify potential traffic calming issues. And that, at the moment, I don't know that I'm specifically formally requesting that, but it's kind of, I wanted to put it out there. I think it's something we ought to think about.
Commissioner McKinney, I think you've just begun to channel Commissioner Hanson.
Is that what I'm doing? Okay.
Yes.
Well, then let me ask another question. If you look at street patterns, you can tell when they were built. If you go back, 50, 60 years, cities were all built with grid type street patterns, in which basically every street is a collector and a local and an arterial. And so, of course, traffic speeds and diverted traffic were a big issue. Then as suburbia exploded across the country, the curvilinear street plan became the thing to do, in which we now have, very clearly delineated arterials versus collectors versus local streets. And geometric designs help to make sure that local streets have calm traffic. My understanding is that in recent years, there's been a trend to go back to what they're calling, sort of a modified grid street layout. And I wonder if you could comment on that from the traffic calming standpoint. Because, of course, a pure grid street layout will have traffic calming issues. You'll have less of them with a curvilinear street layout, with the hierarchical street design. How does a modified grid kind of, when it comes to traffic calming, does it just sort of, as it would seem to, just kind of fall in the gap there, right in the middle between the two? Or do modified grid patterns tend to retain some of the inherent traffic calming abilities that you get with the hierarchical curvilinear street networks?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, I think modified grids where you have, a residential collector entering off of the arterial street network, and then typically with no front-on housing, and then internal streets with front-on housing that are kind of branching away from the residential collector. I think those can have some benefit if they're gridded, particularly if they're fairly well gridded, because once that occurs, then you have lots of paths once you get into the neighborhood. We have the ability to strategically do some traffic control through the use of alternating stop signs if that's something that's appropriate. So I think there's some definite benefit to it. That is, of course, always subject to the the druthers, if you will, of the developer as well. So, how much we put in policy and how much room we give the developer of new streets is probably a little outside of my ability or willingness to comment.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Ross, thank you for your presentation. It's really good to meet you. Could you tell me, because I haven't met you yet until today, could you tell me a little bit of your background and how long have you been with the agency?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering. I've been with ACHD for a total of 26 years now, I believe, or close to that. I think it's between 25 and 26 years of service. I've been in the traffic department since 2003, and I've been the supervisor of traffic engineering since January of 2005. So that all just made me feel really old.
You've been at it for a while. That's good to know.
I have. I've been at it a while.
Oh, that's great. So I mean, I've got several questions here, and I'm just curious. I loved your presentation talking about all the different methods, different considerations for different environments and pieces like that. But I'm just curious, how do communities and neighborhoods specifically request for traffic calming? Like, what are the steps that they have to take?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering. First, the phone rings. That really is the most common way in which we get traffic calming requests. Most often individuals, but many times it will be third-party HOA management representatives working for an HOA, or it will be HOA board members or neighborhood association board members who will either get our contact information and traffic from contacts within the community, or just call us up. And so we typically sort of get those just at the grassroots. And I'm not being facetious when I say sometimes I think there are a few folks who just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and I can see myself doing that in a few months, and getting up on the wrong side of the bed and making a phone call. But it is really pretty grassroots for the most part. When you start getting to corridors like 13th Street and Kootenai Street, it usually fairly quickly is going or coming from a neighborhood association process or an HOA process where they're thinking big picture about a particular street of interest in their community.
But what specific steps, aside from giving you a call, does it take to get traffic calming as an actual project recommendation to the commission or part of the integrated 5-year work plan?
So in terms of, I'll sort of describe the process. When the phone rings and we answer it, we go collect data first and foremost. That is where we start. We want to measure the condition, and then we report back the findings.
And that data collection includes traffic studies. What could you explain?
So it will include speeds and volumes. We'll collect speed and volume information for 7 days, and then we will compile that information, compare the speed and volume information to the policy metrics, and determine whether eligibility criteria is met for one or another of the speed and volume criteria. Are we getting there?
Yep, getting there. Keep going. Yep, thank you.
And so at that point in time, we'll provide that information to the applicant and say, it either doesn't meet the policy metrics, or it does. And if it does, then we can provide the applicant, if they wish to proceed, we can provide the applicant with a petition and a list of residences for which they're going to have to provide owner input.
So with that petition, can you talk about what that looks like, specifically the process for that? Like
Well,
how many signatures do folks have to collect?
So the typical process, and this is set forth in policy, but the process is 75% of fronting residences. And again, we're predicated on residential local collector streets. So 75% support for a local street. We have to use a little bit of discretion to determine whether there are other streets that are sort of captive to that street. And then we can also require 50% buy-in from those folks. So we want a supermajority of support so that when the decision is made to go in and put traffic calming on the ground, that it sticks. That's really sort of the idea. We don't really want a 51-49 sort of a conversation going out there about whether we should or whether we shouldn't, because that really doesn't, that kind of sets everybody up for friction and conflict.
I mean, I totally understand that, but it seems pretty, it doesn't seem very fair that we would require 75% of residents to sign on to this when, I mean, people are really, really busy. They live their lives, and I think I'd be curious to know, how many times we've put in traffic calming that folks have said that I didn't like it. Because I think oftentimes when I'm talking to people, they feel like things need to be slower. It's not safe for their kids to walk to school. And they don't have an idea of what that looks like. But once it's in place, they're just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what this looked like. I just knew there was a problem. And I'm so grateful that somebody with more time and energy could go through that process to realize that. And so I'm just curious if there's any, how often have you come across neighborhoods that weren't happy with traffic calming after it's been installed?
Not often, but it goes back to we got the buy-in up front.
So do you keep record of how many requests you get a year for traffic calming? And what is that?
I looked this morning, our database goes back to 2009, and 1,097 of the requests were, of the investigations in the database had traffic calming as at least one of the tags.
And I'm just curious, how many versus, traffic calming versus like I want my road widened?
I didn't check that one.
I mean, is the 75% the same for when you want a stop sign or a light? Like, is that the same for those types of features?
No.
Why is that?
Because the installation of traffic control devices is an engineering decision. And traffic calming devices are really, they're something that we as an agency do as a discretionary act. But the installation of a traffic control device is, it's really an engineering function.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned neighborhood associations, obviously you're a huge proponent to this. I'm curious, have you ever presented something like this to neighborhood, like just kind of your presentation that you gave to us, have you ever presented this to neighborhood associations?
I have not done that for quite some time. I have in the past met with typically more often neighborhood association or HOA boards. My traffic engineer or assistant traffic engineer who deals primarily with neighborhoods, John Wasson, spends a fair amount of the late winter and spring attending HOA and neighborhood association type meetings.
I just think, while I was on the campaign trail, if I could put things into buckets, most of the time neighborhoods in my district were very passionate about getting more traffic calming. And so knowing what are those design features and understanding the process a lot better, I think will help them be able to go through this with ease and understand their options and be able to move things along faster on there, and while also, hopefully communicating and creating better relationships between the agency and them. Would that be an option? Would you be interested in presenting more often to them at all?
Well, sure, absolutely. When we're asked, we go.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, perfect. Well, what do other agencies outside of Idaho do when it comes to traffic calming in terms of, that signature request? Is 75% pretty much standard across other agencies similar to us, or is it more closer to 60%? Potentially.
Commissioner, I don't know the answer to that question. When we went back and updated the policy, it's now been a number of years ago, we looked generally at their policies in terms of speeds, volumes, eligibility requirements. I don't know how consistent we are with other agencies
Okay.
in terms of the process.
Well, thank you for that. I just think that 75%, although I understand your point, like we need to create that buy-in and build that trust that we need this and we desperately are going to support it when it's up at the commission. But I just think 75% is a little excessive, and any way that we can make it easier for our neighborhoods to act on the things that they need to make it safer for them to live there, I would be in very full support of that. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President, is it my turn?
Oh, you just want to say ditto, I know, for Dave's comments, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. I just
Okay,
want to
thanks for
appreciate
your
Ross.
comment, Jim. Go ahead.
I want to appreciate Ross. You've done a tremendous job. I wish you had more power to change some of the things that have kind of gotten through here that we've looked back and thought, oh, there really should have been some design features put on this, because now we're experiencing speeds. I totally agree. We're discouraged from trying to design things from the podium, but there have been a number of occasions, Commissioner Goldthorpe can verify, where we've raised issues of traffic speeds on a new development, and they go back to staff, and lo and behold, they come back and there's some curb extensions or chicanes or something that it's not that the developer didn't want to do it, they just weren't asked to do it, and they didn't think through how people might have walked through their neighborhoods. And sometimes the lanes don't be as wide, and developers would love that because then that's more land for them to sell. I think there's just the reality is we are dealing with streets that have been authorized without over a century. That we didn't think about how people might behave in automobiles, especially self-contained automobile interaction with the outside world. And so those are design flaws that we just inherit in our streets. They're there. And what I'd like us to do is to think systemically that that's a design flaw. Residents who are living on there didn't make that happen, but they're living with it. And they come to us when we have a need for a crosswalk or a sidewalk gap to be filled or replaced, or there's pavement that's been deteriorating and they need potholes filled, and we don't require them to do signatures gatherings amongst their neighborhood. So I think we need to incorporate the design flaw of how a street encourages speeding into everything we do. I think we're getting there more. But I would agree with Commissioner McKinney and Commissioner Pickering that we really have an opportunity to really integrate this. Because from talking with neighborhoods, it feels really disempowering when they say, oh, we need to do this. Oh, well, the burden now is on you to go collect signatures. Many of them, as Commissioner Pickering pointed out, in neighborhoods where there's modest incomes, I can point to several. Nez Perce, Burgesson Streets, those are two areas where neighbors told me there needs to be traffic calming, but it's rather overwhelming for them to think about going through that whole neighborhood and collecting signatures, so it hasn't been done. Yeah, we've gone on those streets and replaced curb ramps. We put in a whole bunch of ADA accessible truncated domes on Burgesson, I want to say maybe 8 years ago. Not a single street corner had a curb extension. There was absolutely no analysis of the speeds on that street. And yet, if you hang out there, you realize on Burgesson, people and cyclists are on the sidewalk, the attached sidewalks. People are not parking very much on Burgesson, even though there is parking. So there's not a designated sort of narrowness from parking activities. And so that is a speed issue, and you don't really get a speed bump or a dip until you get over towards the turnoff to the school. So there's lots of reasons. In fact, people choose to live on some of these new curvilinear streets or dead ends or cul-de-sacs because they know intuitively people will speed on some of these older streets. So I totally agree with you that one of the best things is to incorporate chicanes and curb extensions, not just for the what that does to raise awareness of drivers that there are people living here. This is their street, but it makes them more visible and feel safer, so they can use them. I also think it's a great idea to use a lot of temporary installations so the neighborhoods actually get excited. Okay, this will work, this won't work, instead of going straight to design and incorporation of those designs. And so we've done it. I think someone asked a question about 15th Street. We've done that, I think, once, but it was a nonprofit that did those things. We said, yeah, that's a great idea, but we should be the ones doing this, and it's a way of pulling people in. The other is, I think there's an opportunity to educate neighbors about what kind of speed management designs could be incorporated when we have to use their streets as a detour for construction, because sometimes we have to close streets, and then new traffic goes through their neighborhood, and they're like, oh, whoa, where is this coming from? And it's like, well, your street actually can function kind of like a collector, partly because it was probably designed too wide. And so people can go through it. Well, guess what? They're going to speed through it just like locals probably speed through it. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities to really do this. I think 75% of all curbs in our streets should have curb extensions. There's no reason why they shouldn't. And that we can address some of the drainage or those things don't relate to the safety of the neighborhood. And so I really would like the commission to completely reevaluate and fully incorporate the traffic, the speed management issues into all of what we do, everything we do. If we're going to go in and do a project and we say, well, what are the utilities that are going to be built under here, so we can coordinate when the utilities are going to go in, we got to just say, so we already know there's probably a design flaw. There's a greater than 50% chance that this street is old and was designed without the concept of what the speed should be. Let's incorporate speed management into whatever we're going to be doing on that, whether it's pavement or replacing a sidewalk or whatever. And so that we don't have this sort of bifurcated thing where, well, if it's related to speeds, you got to deal with it over here. And whereas it's more discretionary and we can incorporate them into projects if it's about putting in a traffic light or some of those other things. But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mary, anything?
No, I think it's been a good discussion. Ross, good to see you. I was just thinking about you the other day. It was nice to see that Kootenai, that Kootenai slide up there. I remember that was one of the first things that I voted on and was so excited about that project. So that's going to be a good one to finally complete. But great refresher for the old timers here as well. So thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Commissioner May.
Ross he personifies what I like to call ACHD's career as a career shop and not a career pit stop. And so I've been really grateful that folks like Ross have been here for so long and made such an impact on everything we do and what you see here in our county. So in case I don't see you again, Ross, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that.
All right. We have another workshop scheduled for purchasing, and this will be especially informative to our new commissioners. But I must say that as I discuss some of this once in a while with staff and our executive team, that I learn a new thing or two every once in a while as well. Jesse, you're on.
Good afternoon, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. My name is Jesse Goodpasture. I'm the Procurement and Contracting Administrator for ACHD. Have with me today Tiana Christensen and Shan Schaefer. They make up the rest of our procurement team. My background is a little bit opposite of Ross's. I've been around at ACHD for about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I had a background in private contracting and some federal work overseas. So Shannon and Tiana are really the experts in the field here. Shannon's our continuity source. She's been with the team for just over 8 years. So that's who we are. This morning I'll be going over, as you mentioned, kind of information on where we are at with operations for purchasing or procuring goods, services, and public works construction, as well as our way ahead. On this slide, we developed a strategic plan for the PCO team a few months ago that goes through 21 and 2022. And we wanted to ensure that nested with ACHD's mission, vision, and priorities. So I highlighted a few items here. Innovation and leaders in technology and design, not necessarily something you might think of for procurements and contracts, but that's critical to our field in ensuring that we are effective and efficient. There's software resources that are available to ensure that we are being good stewards of taxpayers' dollars rather than doing things the old school way. And I'll touch on that again later. I'm going to mention e-procurement a few times. It's critical to the direction that we're going. It's not a resource that we use right now. E-procurement is a software that kind of brings everything procurement and contracting related under one umbrella, cradle to grave process. We don't have that right now. I'm going to be pointing out kind of where we're at and why we want to move to that direction in the future. So for the procurement team, this is from our strategic plan that we developed, again, highlighting a few items for you. We want to be competitive and efficient with taxpayer dollars. We have a trust and want to be good stewards of that. So growing our contractor and vendor base, increasing competition between those resources generally helps ensure that we're finding good resources to conduct our projects and that we're being competitive with those dollars. We do not currently operate as a centralized procurement for ACHD, so we're somewhat decentralized. Our team manages the majority of procurements for the district, but not all, especially when it comes to informals and quotes. Some of those are handled by departments or teams within those departments. So that's, again, something we'll be addressing with the e-procurement workflow in the future. But this is our statement as to where we're at and where we want to be in the near future. So just kind of a general high-level overview. On the left-hand side, you may or may not be involved directly with some of these bids. This is traditional bids generally break out into quotes at the lower end of the dollar threshold, then informals, and then formal bids that are higher dollar threshold, more structured, a little bit more time involved in those procurements. Then on the right-hand side, these will come across your desk, so I wanted to highlight these for you. We have piggybacks or cooperative purchases. These are generally procured by a larger entity. They go through a competitive bidding process. They can secure terms and pricing that smaller agencies might not have access to. They include language so the smaller agencies can be a part of that in the future. We've got sole sources. We only deal with a few of these a year. This is a non-competitive process. There may only be one vendor supplier in the nation that can provide that resource that we're looking for, or there may be a few, but only one of them can meet the timetable of the requirements that we have. Then we have RFPs and RFQs. RFPs for goods and services. This is when you're looking to award something based on a factor other than low bid price. So we'll look at things like, is the vendor, is it a disadvantaged business enterprise, their history and experience working on projects like that, and they'll be evaluated as such. Then we have RFQs for services, working with consultants or development teams. There's no pricing associated with RFQs up front. We're just looking at their qualifications, and pricing comes in after an award, after we've evaluated them and we conduct negotiations with that company.
Jesse?
Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, Jesse, real quick. What types of projects go out to RFP?
I've got a Commissioner, President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, I've got a slide that kind of
has a little hodgepodge of things we've done in the past, but my jacket, our clothing, we did an RFP for that. We use RFPs when we're looking for, we have some requirements that we're looking for, but there may be more than one method of delivering that, and we want to be able to evaluate and compare what's available.
Thank you.
Jesse, how do we keep the piggyback purchasing process competitive in terms of, I know that like the old Whiska and a few other contracts are out there that we can piggyback off of, but oftentimes vendors can significantly undercut those prices.
And we will look at pricing from other vendors at that time and see if there is any lower pricing available. More often than not, it's the piggyback pricing is the best.
Yeah, I didn't know if the other commissioners knew we did that. That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
So this is a snapshot of last year, the procurements that were conducted by the PCO team. On the left-hand side, you have just the breakdown of how many were conducted by category. So we break our procurements into categories of goods, services, and public works construction, fairly close to 1/3 across the board. On the right-hand side, you have the dollar amounts that went into each of those categories, and obviously, public works construction is the highest with some of the bridge and roadway construction projects that we have. And then down below, from this year, just highlighted so far the highest dollar amounts that we have in each of those categories: $6.7 million for the Eagle Road construction projects, $3.1 million for liquid asphalts, usually a high dollar amount, and then our traffic control services. So that's just wanted to pull something out from this year and kind of give you an idea of what last year looked like. This is our landing page on the ACHD website for the procurement team. When I was out last year, actually, Shannon did a great job of moving us to a virtual environment. So we have our instructions for attending bid openings on here. Last month was procurement month. We got our procurement month proclamation approved by the commission. We appreciate that. We listed our new strategic plan here as well for the public to view. Then we break down our procurements into, again, those 3 categories. If you click on one of those categories, it'll take you to the public or staff to a page that has all of our recently advertised or recently opened procurements within that category. So the legal notice, we'll post the bid results on the day of the bid opening. And then once a bid has been awarded, we'll also post the abstract, which we'll have for the public each of the bidders' bid amounts, so they can go back and look at those historically. We do not at this time have a method of notifying the public or contractors or vendors that a new procurement has gone out. We follow code and we list it in the Idaho Press Tribune. When we look at an e-procurement solution, we're looking for a more permanent solution to address that. But at this time, they can go in each of those categories, and there will be a 90-day bid list that will say within the next 3 months. These are the procurements that are expected to go out, roughly the month that they'll go out. So they can see what's projected in there, and then we'll post it in the Press Tribune and a few other resources that we utilize.
And Jesse, just so the new commissioners know, especially those folks that want to do business with us, know when we're going to go out to bid.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. President. So as I mentioned before, this is just kind of an overview of the variety of procurements that we cover. As I mentioned, clothing, we've got our hat and shirts there. That's thermoplastic taping put down. We procured that for the traffic operations team. We worked with commuter rides, secured some of their vehicles, and then all the way up to the high dollar amount items, bridge construction and roadway and roundabout construction. So this is if I were to summarize the bids that we conduct, this would be an overview of that process. So this would be for a formal bid. Again, highlighted a few items on this slide and the next where you would be involved. We generally identify a need through commission directive, the integrated 5-year work plan, public request, and that goes to a project manager within ACHD. They fill out an info form with all the varying details, and we work on drafting that procurement pack or that bid packet for them. We then advertise that in the Press Tribune for over the course of 2 weeks. We advertise every Tuesday. I have a few different resources listed there. As I mentioned before, we're moving from old school to the future right now, so we use a few different resources. Bid Express is an electronic bidding source that we post all of our construction bids through. We don't have a resource like that right now for goods and services, but that's something that e-procurement will bring everything under one umbrella. So we advertise the procurements. During that time, the vendors and contractors can request the full packet from us, or through those resources, they can get all of the documents associated with that bid, or that procurement. If we need, we'll host a pre-submission meeting. I've got another slide that details that. That's usually the second week that a bid's out for advertisement. That's between us, the project manager, and the contractors or vendors that are interested in that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Jesse, can I ask, have we already procured the eProcure software, or is that something we're still waiting to do?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, we are in the process of developing the RFP to procure the e-procurement software.
Okay.
So we'll move to bid openings next. Those are conducted via Zoom on Wednesdays, a few hours after the commission meeting. We'll then internally conduct a responsiveness review. That takes about 2 days. We get that to the department. That's where we do our review to ensure that the proposals received, especially the apparent low bidder, meets all the requirements that were listed in the bid, as well as any policy or code that might be relevant. And once the department approves that, we get the contract written and out to the bidder, give them about a week, maybe a little more than that, to sign, notarize, get whatever documents are required back to us, and then highlight it again. Depending on the type of procurement and the dollar amount that may come across your desk for award, it might also go to the director or a deputy director. That'll be during commission meetings held on Wednesdays. So overall, that process takes about 4 to 8 weeks. The informals and quotes are a much truncated version of that. Our informals we do in about a week. We send them out to potential bidders on Friday, and we ask that the deadline be the following Friday. I have an asterisk on there. As we reviewed this yesterday, I was informed that we are the fastest or at the head of the pack when it comes to our procurement timeline process, being 4 to 8 weeks.
Jesse, just another question. For instance, like with this e-procurement software, do you request or take the opportunity to do demos with different potential vendors?
Yes, President Goldthorpe, we will. On the front end, we had to gather information because we didn't have any information at the time on really what was available out there. So we conducted that. There were some demos involved in that. As we go through the procurement process, once we receive the proposals in response to our RFP, we will will likely pick the top 3 and have about a 30 to 60 day window in which we demo those different solutions. We evaluate them. It's not just our team, but several other teams from other departments will be involved in this as well. So we'll get an opportunity for everyone to demo and evaluate those before we make a decision.
Just curious, how did you develop the specs for that bid?
I'm in the process of developing those right now. Generally, through our professional organizations, we know what's available. We've talked with other cities and states to see what resources what e-procurement solutions they use. Then I'm in the process of meeting with different departments and teams within ACHT to get their wants and needs so I can develop those requirements as we move forward.
Thanks.
One other thing I wanted to call out is our on-call consultant services. So this is conducted as an RFQ, but we maintain an on-call list for professional services as needed. This is a 3-year list, so the last time this was conducted as an RFQ was October of 2018. That list expires this September. We do an annual open enrollment in January for that list. So if a consultant didn't get an opportunity to submit when we did the initial RFQ, once a year they have an opportunity to submit or resubmit if they were not considered qualified or if they want to be added to a different category on that list. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of where we're moving with e-procurement, our look to the future. We want to shift everything that we do to 100% electronic bidding. We don't want to lose any contractors or vendors along the way, so we may have an alternate secondary method that we'll use as well. We want to bring everything under one umbrella with an e-procurement solution. That will, by its nature, centralize some more of the procurement processes that we do. We don't want to utilize that when it doesn't make sense. So whatever our final solution is, it won't, but if it takes 7 days to conduct a quote, whereas the maintenance department can do it in 2 days right now, that's a major flag, and that's something that we would address. So we want to be a force multiplier for the staff and the district. We don't want to be a point that reduces our ability to conduct procurements. And then one way that we will ensure we reach a wider audience is some of these solutions have automatic notification systems where you can register to be notified anytime ACHD lists a new procurement or commodity codes. So we recently did something with another software for IT. I don't recall what it was, but we had some commodity codes in there, and we received responses from vendors in other states that we'd never heard of. So there's options available there with whatever solution we go with, so we can ensure we're reaching a wider audience. And then we may be moving out of a COVID-19 environment, but over the last 12 months, we've really had to adapt to changes in the public environment and how we conduct business. So we'll be continuing to adapt as we need going forward, whatever situations arise. And then finally, we've got our virtual engagements. So again, what we adjusted to, and if you wanted to see us in action, we hold our pre-submission meetings on Tuesdays if and when they are required. That's conducted via Zoom. That's an opportunity for us to review the bid documents and the project with the project manager, our team, and then whatever vendors and contractors there are. These meetings may result in addenda or changes to the bid that we're looking at, the requirements that we have. We encourage discussion. We then do our bid openings on Wednesdays via Zoom. Those are strictly for us to publicly open the bids and list the amounts that were received. It's not an opportunity for discussion or questions from the bidders. That concludes my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
I have a comment. I just want to thank you and your team and the teams that we've had here at ACHD that do our procurement for the last 6 years that I've been involved here. If our potential list of vendors thought that they were being treated unfairly, we as a commission would hear about it very quickly. We don't hear about it, and that's a wonderful thing. We're treating people okay.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Jesse, thank you, team. I just really appreciated this. I know I have so much to learn on all these, back of the house type sections of our agency. So I just really appreciate it. I'm really excited about the e-procurement side of things. Just making things more efficient and keeping things all under one roof is just really exciting. So major props. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jesse, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll now recess for 5 minutes while we change channels and prepare for the executive session.